We should be taking care of our healthcare system, investing in our education system.
Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Chris Farco with Calgary Herald's political columnist Don Braid. Don, it's been a pretty interesting couple of weeks since the by-election victories for the Tories here in Alberta. We've seen both parties, the Wild Rose and the Tories, head into annual meetings, questions sort of looming around some of the leadership. But probably more importantly right now is we've got a legislative session which starts on Monday with Jim Prentice, first time in the House. What are you looking for from the four main parties?
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see what it's like. We know what it's been like in the past. It's been very negative. Everybody snapping at the PCs, all the parties, but particularly Wild Rose. Wild Rose proved to all of them that it doesn't work that way anymore. The by-elections were a clear message that people didn't like that negative tone. So you're going to see a change in Wild Rose. They're already doing it. In fact, they're presenting policies and talking about being positive. Rob Anderson talking about helping Jim Prentice get through low oil prices. So you're going to see a change in tone there. So they got to somehow do that without losing complete control of the agenda they've set, which is being critical of the government.
Right.
I'm very interested in seeing how Rachel Notley is going to do as the new NDP leader, because she's a major factor and major player in this province now, because the NDP can do very well in Edmonton. But once again, it depends on how well Prentice is viewed. So she's got a certain incentive to take him down as well, because Prentice could carry Edmonton okay, but the NDP is going to be the people's option. Then there's the Liberals, Raj Sherman. I don't know where they're going. They seem almost leaderless at times. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens. Yeah.
Last March, we sat in this newsroom just before the session began, and we talked about the issues, and I don't think anybody saw what was coming, which was that one dominant issue, entitlements, would basically drive our Premier, Alison Redford, out of office. Do you see one dominant theme coming up here in the next couple of months?
I can tell you that if Wild Rose or any of the other parties has their teeth into one that we don't know about yet, they will certainly bring it up.
Right.
But I mean, not being so negative doesn't mean that if you got a real whopper, you don't come out with it. They'll come out with it. I'm not aware. I think we've seen the main lines of outlines of those kinds of things. I think the issues in this House would probably tend to be more and more economic.
Right.
People issues, services to people, and particularly if oil prices stay where they are, you're going to see a lot of talk about what's going to happen. And that also could lead us to another thing. Are they going to have an election next spring before the full impact of $75, $76 oil becomes apparent? So if there's a bounce in oil prices, that takes the pressure off that, but that could be what it's about.
For me, what I'm really looking forward to seeing is how Jim Prentice performs in the House. You know, he's really dictated the terms of Alberta politics here in the last 6 months in terms of getting into the leadership race, which was carefully navigated. He ran the race very carefully and did a pretty skillful job. And then he went into the by-elections and really sort of the period right after getting elected, where he put in place his own cabinet, and then, it was a whirlwind of announcements. So he's really had control of the agenda. But I guess what I'm interested to see is how does he handle politics on the fly in the legislature, where things are much more even, and can he do the cut and thrust and still perform as well?
Well, the job of the opposition is now to take that back from him. Like he's controlling what the strategists like to call the narrative now, and it's been an extraordinarily skillful job. It's been extremely well done, very well planned, with a sense of overall strategy and very good tactical movement as well at doing things at the right time. It'll be tough because he's the best we've seen since Peter Lougheed on this kind of level, or Ralph Klein on this sort of getting ahead of stuff. And but their job is going to be to take that back from them, or they're nowhere in the next election. All of them.
And we've seen Danielle Smith in the House, and she's a very skillful operator. I'm going to be interesting to watch how she interplays with him in the House. So, Don, we've had a whirlwind couple of weeks in politics since the by-election, as we mentioned, and our favorite segment is the winners and losers. Who is your loser of the week in politics?
The loser of the week and also the last month, to me, is Danielle Smith, because her leadership has been shaken. They sort of papered that over with their party executive and caucus, saying she didn't need to have that leadership review. But first of all, the campaign wasn't very good, and she's ultimately in charge of that. Secondly, her response to the election loss was very weak, talking about Joe Anglin, for heaven's sake. Why would you do that? He's gone. You don't spend time talking about him. So I think they've got to do fast turnaround. They got to find a way to be effective. She's got to find a way to be effective. She has plenty of skills, but somehow when it comes to the crucial moment, she seems to remember the last election. So she's definitely, to me, the one who has suffered the most in the last while.
I'm going to pick another opposition leader as my loser week, and that is Ross Sherman. I think there is some legitimate questions that have been asked about whether he gave too much money either individually or through his corporations to the Alberta Liberal Party. There's a cap of $15,000 except in election years, and there's some questions over whether he's exceeded that. A complaint was filed with Elections Alberta. They're going to have to look into that. He says he's done nothing wrong, and if this works out fine, I guess he's got no issues. But if they come back and say he gave too much money, then I think he's got a real political question mark looming over his head and whether he can survive as the Alberta Liberal leader.
Absolutely.
My winner of the week is going to be Jim Prentice. Not a big surprise here. I think he's had two very good weeks since the by-elections in terms of doing the things that needed to be done. I mean, he's been talking about oil prices, but he's also gone and made some significant visits to places and meeting with like the Lubicon as well as the chiefs up in Fort Chip. I thought those were very important messages that needed to be sent from the legislature and from the Premier's office. As well, he's had a couple of successful fundraising events in Red Deer and Lethbridge last week, so that's why I've got him as my winner of the week. What do you think, Don?
Well, I'd present a kind of a dark horse. Jonathan Dennis, the Solicitor General, Attorney General, who has gradually increased his influence in the government. He was loyal to Prentice, campaigned hard for Prentice. He's now become, as well as those other positions, the government House Leader, which is a significant job. And he was named to it just before the House sits. When it becomes really important, that's when it's really important. And Diana McQueen, curiously enough, had been named to that a couple of months ago by Prentice and now is out. Not quite sure why, but it's a significant move for Prentice, who has handled himself overall with some skill for several years now.
Well, Monday we'll bring a throne speech, and then we'll be right into question period, and I guess all eyes will be on the legislature.
It's going to be very interesting.